Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my presentation. Today, we'll be talking about cognitive dissonance as it relates to gendered communication. So how many of you have heard the line, men are from Mars and women are from Venus? This line is usually to relate to how different we are, to where people compare us as being from different planets. So in a world where men and women must coexist and even mate in a heterosexual society, this leads to a sense of cognitive dissonance when we're constantly butting heads. So the push for heterosexual people, or just men and women in general, to come together and live amongst one another with no issues is overshadowed by the lack of understanding we have for one another. So leading up to this speech, I've done a lot of research on gendered communications and society's effect of them. Like I found out about issues like the 4B movement, which I'll talk about later. And this led me down multiple rabbit holes, which is why I picked this speech topic. I'll show examples of the different communication styles between men and women and how it leads to cognitive dissonance. Then I will highlight the effects of that dissonance in society and give suggestions and methods to improve it. Now that we have some background on the issue, let's examine specific examples of different communication styles in men and women. So women communicate to make decisions based off of interpersonal relations, cooperation, and interdependence. So think of the term team player. Women pay attention to similarities between themselves and others and make benefits that will benefit those around them. And we're typically experts in what's called rapport talk, which is intimate communications that builds, strengthens, and nurtures relationships. And in the book Gendered Lies by Julia Wood, she describes the most important aspects of female communication as establishing equality and supporting others, as well as disclosing information. Men, on the other hand, communicate based off of task accomplishments and establishing the facts with emphasis on status implication of messages. So men make decisions based off of personal needs with added emphasis on differences. So think how women seek to relate to one another, men seek to distinguish themselves from others. And men are experts in report talk, which is a type of communication where they solve problems and analyze issues. So men use communication to gain status and establish assertiveness, as well as accomplish objectives. Now, due to these different styles, right, with women using it for nurturing and men using it for gaining status or problem solving, it leads to tension. For example, say a woman addresses a man with an issue expecting emotional intimacy or some kind of emotional response, and usually the man will address her with a piece of advice or like a solution for the problem. But this is often seen as being emotionally dismissive, but the man is just responding the way he knows best. And conversely, when a man addresses a woman with an issue, she may respond with like a relating comment, like, oh, I can relate, I understand how you feel. And that doesn't really necessarily make him better because he'd rather hear solutions at that point. And so it'll seem as though he's rejecting her attempts at becoming closer with him. When we try to relate to one another or communicate, it leads to us hitting a wall for this exact reason. So with our gained understanding of the different communication styles and the issues that come from them, we're going to examine how it manifests in society. Loneliness. While loneliness affects both men and women, men suffer more due to their communication style. So men in their 20s are more likely than women in their 20s to be romantically uninvolved, sexually dormant, or lonely. And this may be because men aren't emotionally connected to women or other men. In terms of romance, women seek out partners that are empathetic and emotional. And this may not be a common trait in other men, which leads to them ultimately being rejected. And it leads to a sense of cognitive dissonance. And this rejection is a result of that. Patriarchal ideas such as of masculinity, like rationalism, also leads to men, or just hyper independence, it leads to them alienating themselves from others, and it contributes to that loneliness. And women are choosing to no longer interact with men due to unmet emotional needs and emotional exhaustion. And that leads to movements like the 4B movement, where women in South Korea aren't marrying or reproducing with men. And it's gaining popularity and spreading to China and even the United States under different names. And these movements are as a result of inequality in relationships and household responsibilities and just poor association with one another. And so after exploring the ways these issues manifest in society, it leads to the final point, which is solutions. Men and women may seem as though we come from different planets, but we don't. We're from the same place. So we can bridge that divide. The best way to deal with ignorance or lack of understanding is to try to understand. We cannot change each other, nor should we try, but we can try to meet in the middle ground. Just like how a right-handed person could become ambidextrous, men and women can adopt and alternate one another's communication styles to meet in a common ground. We can also all benefit from conflict resolution skills as it relates to gendered communication. So empathizing with one another, not being defensive, and seeking compromise. When we understand each other, our reactions are, well, when we misunderstand each other, our reactions are harsh and punishing. And in moments like these, we can remind ourselves of our humanity and try to relate better. So with our newfound understanding of communication and cognitive dissonance as it relates to gender, it is safe to say that we don't have to feel as though we come from different planets. We can live amongst each other well. So during the speech, we explored men and women's different communication styles, the issues that rise from them, differences along with cognitive dissonance that they might cause, and ways to remedy them. So from the speech, you should be able to understand the dissonance between men and women and be aware of their effects and have the skills to fix them. The main takeaway from this is that men and women have lived amongst each other for eons, and it is about time we re-examine the ways we communicate and relate to one another in society. Thank you.